Okay, we're started a little bit later than had planned, but we are going. So welcome. This is the first of a series of empathy circles I'd like to hold with empathy activists, and both of you are empathy activists. That's with look at that. Super, you lead in the back of there's you lead. So that's with authors like you, Minter, and other activists who are doing research. And oh, there's Lou. Yeah, so that's people who are teaching, promoting empathy in some way or another. So I wanted to start a series of these empathy circles with empathy activists to start talking about how we can build a movement for empathy. And just, talking about that, we're going to be using the empathy circle practice. And so it's a practice that I think is actually the best first step gateway practice. And both of you are very familiar with the practice, so we won't need to go into how that works. But anyone that's watching this can just check into the descriptions below, and there'll be instructions there for how the process works, and you just will understand it by observing it. And there is Lou. Great. Yep. We were waiting for Lou, and now he is here. Okay. Hey, Lou.
Hey, Lou.
Hi. Sorry for the confusion. Yeah. I thought it was at 10 o'clock Pacific time.
I mentioned that too. I think we usually have it at 10, so we started a little hour earlier than we usually start. So I thought that might be the issue. So I've just been giving an introduction to what we're doing here, that we're going to be using the empathy circle process. And so I thought we'd start with just each of the participants introducing themselves, your name, your location, and something about your empathy work. You can add your website too, and just take about a minute, and I'll just model it. So Edwin Rutsch, I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I've been working for about 14 years on creating a more empathic society, do all kinds of work at our cultureofempathy.com website. We do empathy circles, trainings, have an empathy tent that we take out to the public spaces. I just ran for Congress under the empathy banner, didn't win, but got the word out there. So that's kind of what I've been doing, and just trying to do everything I can to create a more empathic society. So Lidewij, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Lidewij Niezink. I am a Dutch girl based in the southwest of France. And I have been working on empathy for the past 20 years. I did a PhD in social psychology and empathy, and then thought, okay, that's nice theory. Now what about practice? So started my own business and developed training and coaching. And since about 7 years now, I work together with Catherine Train, who's based in South Africa, and together we co-founded Empathic Intervision. And so we develop empathy courses, we give a lot of empathy courses, and develop really the practice of empathy. That's what my interest lies, and I'll be doing this for the rest of my life.
Oh, great. What's your website? Is there any way for people to contact you?
Yeah, empathicintervision.com.
Okay, great. Minter, do you want to go?
Surely, God, I have maybe 16 months, no, just kidding, of empathy in my life. I come to empathy through the practice in business. And I used to be a senior executive at L'Oreal. I ran a company around Canada, then I was in the executive committee, looking at how empathy exists actually in leadership and how can you practice it within an operational space. And since then, I've written a few books. I like storytelling, but two of my books have had a real focus on empathy. One is Artificial Empathy, which is all about trying to encode empathy into a robot, a bot, artificial intelligence, and how that's really fascinating to understand ourselves and think about why we actually want to delegate it to a bot. And then the last book I wrote, published, called You Lead, where I talk about leadership and the role within leadership of empathy. My site, minterdial.com, is kind of where everything resides. I reside in London with a little foot in a small place in Paris.
Thanks. And all those links will be down in the description too. Lou, do you want to go?
Well, I'm really moved actually by hearing everyone else's explanations of who they are. So I'm Lou Zweier. I live in Northern California, although at the moment I'm in Southern California. So I've studied nonviolent communication, studied it, taught it for a long time, since about the mid-90s. I started working with, actually I met Edwin when I was working on a web TV series called What You Say Next Can Change the World with the Bay Area Center for Nonviolent Communication, where we were teaching nonviolent communication through role plays in a video format, and Edwin was a guest on the show. And I reconnected with him about 5 years ago, I think 4 or 5 years ago, when I heard he was doing his public empathy tent thing, and I thought, this is fabulous. So I went down and started doing that with him at Berkeley. And for the last 2.5 years, I helped him develop a training for the empathy circle practice, and actually also helped to articulate some of the thinking around the empathy circle and why it works as well as it does, and helping to train people for the last 2.5 years. And that's been a wonderful journey, very enriching, working with people from all over the world, to connect with them and to see their interest in learning to be more empathic and to listen better and to bring that into their communities, which has been a really moving thing. And one of the things I did in my own community where I live was a public listening project where we brought people together for an evening. We were doing this once a month, I think, and then a little bit more frequently towards the latter part. And we were I trained a group of about a dozen facilitators, and we would have the evenings, and people would come, and we'd have a couple of topics that we would announce. But then there were also, you could request that there be a circle on a particular topic, or that there could be a no topic circle. And we ran that project for about a year. And when COVID hit, we did it online a little bit after that, but then it kind of petered out. So and then I think the other activity I've been involved with for about 20 years is leadership training with a group called the Authentic Leadership Center in Sacramento. And that's an 8-day intensive training. And I would say that listening skills, communication skills, and empathy, compassion are a big part of that training. And one of the main things I learned from that training is that when people start to have more compassion for themselves and empathy for themselves, that's when they start to be able to have it for other people. And that was a really interesting learning that that's really when people begin to shift, and they start not to just have an intellectual understanding, but actually an open-hearted, starting having more open-heartedness. When they have more open-heartedness towards themselves, then they actually can have more open-heartedness towards other people.
Okay, thanks, Lou. I'm going to cut you off there because I just wanted 1 minute quick, and then we're going to bring you into the empathy circle practice itself. So I'm going to post in the chat, our question, which is, how might we build the empathy movement, or whatever's alive for you, meaning whatever's on your mind. We're going to have 5-minute turns, and I'll keep time. And if you think, hey, we don't need an empathy movement, that's fine to talk about as well. Say, hey, this is a bad idea. So whatever you want to say about the topic is fine. So since everyone's familiar with the practice, we can just get started. And if someone wants to be the first speaker and select who you want to speak to, I'll keep time. And so you want to speak a bit, give a pause, get a reflection, and I'll kind of put up this little sign here, time, when your time is up, get your sort of wrap up what you're saying, in a sentence or so, get your final reflection, and then the listener will become the speaker. So who would like to start? Looks like Minter, select your listener.
Lou.
Hi, Minter. Yeah, I'd be happy to listen to you.
Thank you. All right. So Edwin just showed a sign that says time. And I felt like I need to riff off that because that's been a topic in my mind recently. The notion of time when it comes to listening, and the allocation, for example, of 2 hours for an empathy circle, and how people feel very pressed for time and struggle to allocate the time to listen properly.
Yeah, so you're really reflecting on the component of time and the kind of limit set by time, or the boundaries of time, and how that relates to empathy. And your question, I'm hearing you questioning that. I don't know that for sure, but it sounds like you're questioning whether time limits on speaking and time limits on circles, whether that is a good idea or whether that gets in the way of empathy.
Indeed, I think I come from it in the thought that most people aren't willing to give the time or allocate the time to listen carefully. And it has been my experience and observation that the more open-ended the time allowed for conversation, the more perhaps messy, but better ability to actually listen and develop thoughts that can be conflicting. But because we don't have the rush of time, I don't need to dictate some narrative or tell you what I got to tell you.
Yeah, so I think what I'm getting, you're saying, is that um, one of the things you notice is that people have difficulty in our current culture, which is all very rush, 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 and everything's very intense. People have difficulty deciding to set aside the time to listen or to take time to listen in a conversation. And that you think that one of the things maybe that promotes good listening and empathy is not actually having a time structure. That openness, a sense of openness about time, is important, and that and that might be messy, but you think that might promote more empathy.
So 2 last things. First is a funny anecdote that 50 years ago, today compared to 50 years ago, classical music is played 30% faster than it used to be. I listened to that on a podcast with Etienne Klein last night, and the comment of the journalist was that reflects our need for speed. Right? Cram it in. And then the second, oh, you want to finish that one?
Yeah, so you're saying something that's a very good example of this thing about our intensity now in our culture and how everything has to be fast, is that classical music is played 30% faster than it used to be. And that's just emblematic of everybody wants things to happen fast.
And then the second thing is where I try to exercise or bring empathy into the workplace. And with this crushing need for effectiveness and efficiency, where time is one of the most rare resources in business, it's particularly challenging to, for example, execute an executive empathy circle where everyone's rush, rush, rush is pinging and alerts and everybody's got things to do. Anyway, that's where I want to bring empathy into as an activist, is bring more empathy in the workplace as a great learning for everybody.
Yeah, so this last piece, you're reflecting on your own work of trying to bring empathy and empathic connection into the workplace, and just what a challenge that is, because time is such a valuable resource, and the workplace in particular is a place where that intense culture, our culture of everything has to happen fast and we need to have a lot of efficiency, that's very heightened in that environment. So it makes it very challenging.
And I would probably add where there's a lot of empathy deficit in terms of leadership and in the constitution of executive committees.
Yeah, and you're saying that there's also just a very big empathy deficit among the people who are leaders in business, and that makes it even more challenging.
I'm feeling heard, Lou. Thank you very much.
Great. Great to connect with you again, Minter.
Likewise.
Yeah, so I'll go to, how do you say your name?
Lidewij.
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 With a,
Well,
with a little spit.
Lidewij. Okay,
be
so
happy to listen
can
to
I?
you, Lou.
Thank you. Okay, well, I'm already just, my heart's full already listening to this. This is like really rich. So I think, so it's coming to my mind. So I totally agree with Minter about the pace of modern society and, rush, 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 and how much that makes it difficult for people to hear each other, to take the time to hear each other. Although I actually think that hearing each other doesn't actually take a lot of time. If people are clear about what's going on with them and being able to express it, that doesn't take a lot of time, and hearing it doesn't take a lot of time. So part of that has to do with a desire and a recognition of the importance of that, like that people value that and that they have the skills to do it. And it is difficult to overcome that. I'll stop there.
Mm. Yeah, so you're reflecting on the richness of what Minter has just been sharing, and you completely concur with him about this rushed society that we live in and this constant pressure for time. And yet you recognize that actually expressing yourself doesn't have to take that much time, and listening doesn't have to take that much time either. So this work is more around intentionality, about having the capacity or the willingness to listen. I think that's what I heard.
Yeah, and one of the things that's really wonderful about the empathy circle practice is how it teaches people to do the listening and even to do the speaking, that it affects how people speak, without a lot of instruction. And I've tried to teach communication skills to people for a long time, and that was one of the things that I thought was really magical and kind of wonderful about the empathy circle, is how it affected both speaking and listening without a lot of explicit instruction. I'll stop there.
Mm. Yeah, so that the magic, or one of the magical things about the empathy circles, is that it's actually teaching people to listen and to speak. So to speak in order to be heard. And with your communication background, you found that was very striking in the empathy circle work.
Yeah, and on the speaking side, because we mainly focus on listening, like you want to listen and reflect back. But what I noticed was, because people have a limited amount of time to express themselves, people that aren't very clear or aren't very efficient in the way they express themselves, over time they start to realize, I'm hardly getting a chance to say, hardly get my ideas out. And I've had people say to me at the end of an evening of empathy circles saying, I realize I need to get to the point more quickly. I say a lot of other things that I don't necessarily have to say, and I need to learn to get to the point more quickly.
Yeah, so to the point of speaking, you say actually having this time limit on the speaking can bring quite a realization for people who don't have that ease of getting to the point, right? So who are not that clear in their minds yet, or sharing things and not sure where they're going yet, and so they feel very time constrained in the empathy circles. But then at the end of a session, you notice that people realize actually that's not because of the circle, that's because I need to be more succinct, I need to get to the point.
Yeah, and I'd say the other thing that I like about time constraints in the circle is, as a good listener, as someone who is, who winds up in the listening position a lot, I have experienced lots and lots of people who just love to talk and not say much, but they talk and talk a lot. And so, so having a time constraint has this effect of helping people realize that they're not getting to the point where, they listen to other people in the circle who do. And the other is that it creates mutuality in the conversation, where often, in just a normal conversation in a group or even one-on-one, there's rarely any kind of mutuality. And so
Mm.
I think time constraints are really healthy for that reason.
So speaking to the use of time constraints, being often in the listener role in the empathy circles, you're very aware of so many people who really love to speak, right? And who can go on and on and on and on speaking. And that this time constraint is actually helping them to, again, be more succinct, be more clear to the point about what they want to share, and helps them to develop that capacity.
Right. And a consciousness about mutuality. You know,
And sorry, yeah,
that conversation is mutual.
yeah.
And it yeah. So
Yeah,
thanks.
sorry, and the mutual. I missed that. Great, thank you. The mutuality, that the conversation is mutual, and that actually, people with all that ability to speak, have little practice in listening, and they learn that in the empathy circles.
Yeah, thank you. I feel very heard. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, Edwin, I'd like to turn the circle round then.
Listening.
Yeah. So many things have come up. But I'd like to bring it to the movement, right? Because I've been thinking a bit about movement and empathy movement, and having been in this space for quite a while, I think we're actually in a period of time where there is some sort of movement happening. And so my question would be, what are we moving towards? What is that movement?
So you're wanting to bring the topic back, specifically to the movement, and you're feeling that there is sort of a movement growing, and you're wondering where is it going, or what is the goal of that movement?
Yeah. So, well, more specifically about when you say how can we build the empathy movement, or how do we realize an empathy movement? I'd like to start with, what movement do we want to, what is the movement that we want to build with an empathy movement?
Yeah, so if I'm talking about, hey, let's build an empathy movement, let's really understand what is that movement? Where is that movement sort of going, and what is that movement?
Yeah.
Sounds like sort of an embodied quality to it as well, maybe for you.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't think that, but there is. I do have that. What I was thinking is, what I am trying to get across in the past few years is empathy is about intentionality, right? So empathy is not inherently good or inherently bad. Empathy comes with intention. And just like Lou says, empathy also comes with attention, right? But so what is the intentionality with which we practice empathy? And I think that is something to explore in terms of movement.
So you really want to explore, in terms of the movement, what's the intentionality of that empathy, and really kind of get into that quality of intentionality.
Yeah. Thank you. I feel very heard.
Is there more, or you
No.
feel complete? Okay. Right. Then I'll speak to Minter. Keeping the time here. Yeah, so I was thinking about the time, and we do have time limits here, 5 minutes, and Lou had addressed some of the issues around the time limits within the empathy circle, but I kind of wanted to reiterate some of those kind of qualities.
So we just started talking about time at the beginning, and Lou addressed a bunch of the elements within the empathy circle, how time has a constraint within the empathy circle and some of the benefits, and you wanted to elaborate on that.
Yeah, and it is one of the big complaints when people come into the circle is that I do all the listening in my family or whatever, and nobody listens to me. And I grew up in an environment perhaps like that too, where people just talk and talk, and it's just you can't get a word in edgewise. So I really appreciate sort of that the sort of the sense of fairness and equality in terms of the time, setting the time at the beginning, that we're going to have a sense of equality here, that everybody gets heard to their satisfaction.
So some people come to empathy circles saying, oh, all the time, I'm the guy who has to listen, or the gal who has to listen all the time, like you yourself had. And what's interesting or nice about the empathy circle is that it allows for more sharing of time, and everybody gets their time on the what's it called, the soapbox, the
Exactly, yeah,
microphone.
on the soap. But what happens is this is a little bit like training wheels. The empathy circle I find is a bit like training wheels for empathy, in the sense that once you've done it for a while, you know, at the 5 minutes, you know, after an hour or two, it kind of becomes integrated into people. You can almost then just almost let go of the time, and then people just start respecting that time aspect. So yeah.
Yeah, so empathy circle, it's a practice. It's structured with the 5 minutes, and at some level it then becomes ingrained, and you can use it, the expression of training wheels, so that you, once you take off the training wheels, you just sort of can go without them, and the respect and listening happens more naturally.
And then that quality of efficiency, which you were addressing, is, I think that this is very efficient in the long run. It depends, is it short-term efficiency in business, you know, in the culture, or long-term efficiency? And empathy is, I think, a long-term efficiency, because if you consider, you know, the wars and the conflicts and so forth that come up by people not empathizing with each other, that I think that what we're doing is sort of setting, it takes maybe more time to begin with, but in the long run, it's going to be way more efficient.
Yeah, so we were talking about time and efficiency, and there's a big difference between short-term efficiency and long-term efficiency. And it feels like the empathy circle is a good way to become more efficient over a longer time frame. And if you look at all the things that are going on, the bad things that are happening where there's a lack of empathy, it seems maybe a great opening and need for showing for need of empathy as a long-term tool for effectiveness.
Yeah, and the other is, I did want to respond. I heard Lidewij say that empathy is neutral. I have a different view on that in terms of intentionality. I think empathy is inherently positive and constructive. It's similar to your lungs. Like, lungs are inherently positive. If you don't have lungs, you're not going to breathe and you're going to die. So it's not like a psychopath can have lungs and then be a psychopath, or somebody can be very altruistic or what have you and have lungs. So the positive and negative aspect, or the constructive aspects, are a different factor. But I don't know if that's clear, but it's the lungs itself is an inherently positive quality.
So what I was hearing was, well, so Lidewij said that empathy is inherently neutral, and you were pushing back and saying, well, you think it's actually inherently positive, much like lungs serve a positive function for human beings, whether they're a sociopath or a wonderful person.
Yeah, a Buddha. I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Or Jerry Garcia. So I'll go back at you, Edwin, just to change up the rhythm. In terms of intentionality, it does strike me that a little similar to the idea of progress. Is progress always progress? And it feels like we've lost our way as a society as to what we think is progress. And some might be more open-armed, more optimistic, and for, you know, more of a globalist perspective. And others might look at that as not so progressive. They might think as maybe that form of progression is not as positive as others. I'll start with that.
So you're wanting to look at what the sort of the meaning of progress is, like what is progress? What is sort of really progress? Not sure I quite got that.
Yeah, well, that's it. Well, the idea is that the intentionality behind empathy, we might think of it as making the world a better place or arriving at some form of progress. But your definition of progress might be different from Lou's, mine, or Lidewij's. And unless we know where we're going, it might just be empathy that goes down a wobbly road. Good lungs, perhaps, but I'm not sure where we're running with good lungs if we don't have the same idea of where we're headed.
So there's something about having a common intentionality. It's like, what is the intentionality? Coming back to what Lidewij was saying, like, what is the intentionality of what we want to do with empathy and seeing the importance of that?
And the reason why this is important to me is that I believe we kind of have to find a North Star direction, which is less about being good and doing better for progress, but allowing us to meet in the messy middle, where we're not about self-righteous benefit or proselytizing about the goodness of the world, because I don't know if everybody really believes that, and the people who might need the empathy most certainly might not agree with that as well. So we'd have to avoid that as the end goal and have a more of a journey type of objective.
So you're saying that in terms of the intentionality, you don't want to be like self-righteous about it and about the intention, and see this is a journey. You mentioned meeting in the middle, maybe not on a extreme, and it's more of a messy middle.
Which I feel like is going to help people who are less empathic come into empathy better. And the extremely relevant example for me is business, where inevitably, as Lidewij and I have shared on a number of times, it's really not about being nice. It's about getting the best solution, and the best solution may not be good for the world necessarily, but at least if we can come to agreement on a solid objective that fits them, they're going to come into empathy and feel good about it, rather than feel like it's about making the world a better place.
So you're
which might be too far.
Yeah, you're wanting to be able to speak to the business community who maybe has a sense of self-interest and sort of efficiency, and you're looking for a message that sort of speaks to them, is sort of what I'm getting.
Yeah, and allows empathy to be the conduit to that objective. So rather than give a big objective of making the world a better place, the objective, the destination, is the messiness of the middle.
So instead of it, the sales being the intention being, hey, let's make the world a better place, that you've got an intention that sort of speaks to them. They have an intention to speak to their intention.
And the interesting thing is that this can be the conduit to that intention. So it's sort of like there's like this underneath meta intention. It's almost like empathy can be the solution to so many things, but finding ways to get into less empathic people is what I'm interested in doing.
So you like to be able to speak to people who maybe don't have the intention of the broader intention for more empathic society. You want to find what will speak to them and kind of slowly bring them into that larger, more empathic intention. And that was the time.
I am feeling heard. Thank you, Edwin.
I'll speak to Lou.
Okay.
Yeah, I was feeling a little distracted because having set everything up, you were coming late, then I was looking for your email, your phone number. I couldn't find your phone number. and then somebody else is trying to use my room, my other Zoom room. And so there's a lot of sort of distractions happening. I just want to kind of voice those distractions, which actually inhibits a little bit the good listening.
Yeah, so you're just telling us about all the little distractions that have been happening for you and how that has made it a little bit of a challenge for you to remain present. And you just wanted us to know that.
Yeah, and when I was talking about empathy, being like lungs, being inherently positive, constructive, there's I guess there's something about that I want to sort of explore, because so I'm just trying to think about that, kind of work that into what Minter is and Lidewij are talking about.
Yeah, so going back to the analogy of empathy being like lungs, is something that is up for you, and you want to explore that some more. You want to talk about that some more and figure out how it fits with what Lidewij and Minter were saying.
Yeah, that is not inherently self-righteous. It's like, self-righteousness is like, hey, I got the answer, and you're just totally in your world, and it's like but I don't see that is actually self-righteous. I see it as actually I don't know, a counter to self-righteousness, because you're willing to empathize with people who don't agree with you or whatever. So it's not shutting down other people like self-righteousness does.
Yeah, so you're saying that you don't think empathy is inherently self-righteous, and that actually empathy is maybe an antidote to self-righteousness, because empathy is an openness to wherever the person is and whatever they're feeling. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So I hear a lot, empathy is neutral, right? It's like it's a neutral stance. I don't think empathy is a neutral stance. I think it is a stance. So when I stand and say, hey, I want an empathic society, I am taking a very firm stance, and I'm not being neutral. Everything, whatever anybody does is fine. It's like, or indulgent, or, like you have the, sort of self-indulgent parenting, or, whatever. So it's really taking a very strong stance, and being also clear that you cannot not take a stance, I think, in life.
Yeah, so you're saying that a lot of people say that empathy is neutral, and you're saying no, it's not neutral, that empathy is taking a stand for saying, I want a more empathic society, and I want to listen to everyone. I want everyone actually to listen to everyone. And that you think of that as a firm stance, and that empathy is not agreeing with empathy does not mean agreeing with whatever anyone wants to do, like a very permissive whatever,
Exactly.
like, okay, I accept everything.
Yeah.
And that it's more taking a stance that you want everyone to listen to everyone and try to understand everyone.
Yeah, and sometimes I find this sort of criticism of empathy is coming from a stance that, I really understand the world is a selfish, cynical sort of a world. And it seems to be a standpoint. Yeah, I don't know. I see that. It's not everybody's kind of doing it, but I do see that sort of, that I know what the world is. It's dog eat dog. And, it's sort of and which means that I'm not naive, or, something like that. So anyway, these are like deeper sort of kernels of what's going on in our reality that I think that really need to be sort of explored and articulated to create a movement. To create a movement, we got to have sort of a clarity about these topics.
Yeah, so I think you're saying that the critics of empathy, the people that that are criticizing empathy, they're taking kind of the idea that they are more connected to reality. They know what's really going on, which is the world is really a dog eat dog place, and empathy is just like some kind of fake little rose-colored glasses lens, and that they know what's going on. And you think, while you don't I think you're saying, while you don't completely deny that, or you think that those ideas of what reality is, that you think it's important to explore that and try to get clear about that, because if we're going to have an empathy movement, we need to be clearer about that.
Exactly. Yeah, I feel very heard. Thanks, Lou.
Okay, great. Okay, so I will go to Lidewij. Got so many interesting ideas. So I do think that for me, empathy is about just trying to understand people, understand what they're thinking and what they're feeling, and trying to not just understand it intellectually, but open your heart to it, meaning that you feel with them. That to me is what empathy is about, and the purpose is to understand someone fully and to let them know that they've been understood fully, so they feel that. And yeah, and I'll stop there.
Yeah, so empathy, the practice and the purpose, I think, is what you're saying, is to fully understand other people and to make sure that they feel that. So it's not just a cognitive thing, it's opening your heart to them, and it's making sure that they also have the experience of being fully understood.
Yes, and I've, like, in the public listening project that I did, I wrote up kind of a thing that I would read at the beginning, like statement of purpose, that our reason for being here and talking to each other and doing this practice is to understand each other, not to convince somebody or argue with them or challenge them or agree or disagree, that it was really just to understand each other. And so and I would say that to people who are very kind of action oriented and very problem solving oriented, those people were impatient and kind of and sometimes not willing to participate because they didn't think they needed to understand other people more.
Yeah, so in your public listening project, you were setting that out as an intention, like that we do this in order to understand each other. And what you found is that the people who are action-oriented, who are go-getters, they had some impatience around that, and it was difficult for them to take that as the common goal. Right? That it worked on their nerves a bit.
Yeah, and I think. Yeah, and I think that, well, I certainly know that mutual understanding is not all that's needed to solve problems, but it's a very important first step, and it's the one that is often missed that keeps conflict from being resolved or difficulties from being resolved. Is people think they already understand the other person, they already know everything, and they don't, and they have a lot of assumptions, and so that's why the mutual listening is such an important, like empathy is such an important step to problem solving.
So you're very well aware that mutual understanding and mutual listening is not the panacea to all, it's not going to solve all the problems, but you're also very well aware that it's often lacking, that people think they understand each other, think they know each other, and so they don't, right? And so that it's a very important first step towards problem solving is to be able to reopen up and try to understand each other.
Right. Yeah, and I think one of the difficulties with people who are, working for social change type people, they think they do understand already. And even if they do understand, they don't necessarily understand that person. Like, they might understand the issues generally and how things are, but do they understand the person in front of them that they are actually need to work with in order to solve a problem? That person is a particular human being with a particular set of feelings and a particular kind of experience. And if you're actually working to make change, you have to know the person in front of you. You have to connect with them and form a relationship with them.
So, and you're specifically thinking about the change makers in this world that might have the idea of understanding, and you say, well, even if you do have the understanding of that bigger whole, the understanding you need is the understanding of the person you're empathizing with, right? Is the person in front of you. And so you need to be able to take a step back and really understand that individual in its individual expression first.
Yeah, thank you. And getting back to, there's so many interesting threads in this conversation, but so getting back to the movement, the idea of, movement, what would it take to create a movement? I have to say that my first feeling about that, or my instinct about that, is some caution about like creating a movement, like that. I don't know. I have some suspicion of that for some reason. I think it has to do with well, it might have to do with my own inexperience, actually, in creating movements. But I think it also has to do with having some suspicion of trying to create something that is I guess my orientation is towards small organic things that grow, and that's actually how change happens, as opposed to creating something big and influencing people to join it. Somehow there's something not fake, but
so with relation to the movement, you have some hesitancy around it, and you're looking at what is it exactly. And on the one hand, you recognize it might be also related to sometimes I lose English words. This is one of them. My inexperience with creating a movement, right? But there's something else that you keep pondering on, and you're looking for what it is. And what you do know is that you'd like things to come bottom up, and you think it should start within the intimacy of smaller group that goes and develops itself, rather than us posing out in the world and here is the empathy movement.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for capturing that.
Yeah, Minte, would you do video there?
Great pleasure.
So I also had many thoughts over this long period of listening to all of you, and I'm trying to picture them together, and it's going to be a bit messy, so beware.
So you've just been listening now to several of us speaking, and it's got lots of different angles, and you want to put this together in some soup and see where it goes.
Yeah, thanks. So the one thing I think is interesting about empathy and the lungs, right? I really like the image of the lungs, empathy as being the lungs, and it's the capacity. And I think actually Edwin and I are really finding each other there, in that it is, I would say, empathy is a practice, right? And so in that same sense, it is the lungs. It is there, it's moving. And for me, that has nothing to do with the intentionality or with the neutrality or the goodness or the badness of the empathy, but more of the empathy is a practice. The empathies are the ever expanding and retracting lungs that keep on going.
Yeah, so you were wanting to connect into what Edwin was saying about the lungs, and the lungs aren't necessarily, or nor is empathy about being good or bad, but it's actually just a practice, a muscle that gets heaved out and in, and that's what we want to develop, is that sort of practice.
Yeah, develop, but maybe also that it's always there. That's what I like about the image of the lungs. While there is a lot of practice around developing empathy, there's also the basis of these lungs, right? Of this movement of these lungs that I really like in that image.
Yeah, so it's not just a practice, it's something that's always around. You're always breathing, the lungs are always moving. You can have the practice on the side, but it's as a baseline, there's always these lungs coming in and out.
Yeah, which is not to be misunderstood as everybody has empathy and you just need to become aware of it. I do really think that empathy is a practice and that it takes a lot of flying hours to get skilled.
Yeah, so it's not that everybody has empathy. It is a practice. And I suppose to connect that, it does mean that if you want those lungs, you need to figure out how to breathe into it properly.
Yeah, it's nice. That's something around. So the lungs are there and it's something around building the capacity of those lungs. Yeah, nice. Thank you. Yeah. And then the other thing, oh, sorry, do you want to?
No, I was just going to say that back, but I think I got it.
Yeah. So the other thing that stands out to me in what we talked about so far is the soapbox, right? Which different people spoke to it in different ways. And I think it's one of the things that I'm doubting around the reflective listening is the soapbox effect of this practice. I have my 5 minutes to tell my story, and where do we develop the dialogue in the empathic listening? That's the other thing that I'd like to reconnect with.
Yeah, so you were reflecting back on this idea of this one-way talk, if you will, on the soapbox. When I have my 5 minutes, I'm on a platform and I get to say what I have to say. There's reflective listening, but it's not really a dialogue per se. It's just a download dump. And then where is the exchange happening?
Yeah, because that's one of the, I think we all recognize also in this empathy circles practice is the magic that can happen, right? That a real surplus to the four of us can exist if we start really exchanging in dialogue.
Yeah, so
less than soapboxy. Like,
right.
This is what I think.
Yeah, there is magic in the empathy circle's ability for us to connect, four of us, as we go through the time together. Maybe there's just this sort of question mark around the notion of the 5-minute download versus the overall effect of the 2 hours of an empathy circle, where there's more mutuality happening as an effect as opposed to in the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe. It's not what I said, but I like the thought.
Sorry,
I'm not sure what I said.
I was trying to understand.
Well, maybe just let me get to the next point. Yeah, and then I'll stop. Sorry, Edwin. Is the messiness. So I think that's something that I'm doing here, right? And that I think that this practice and maybe the movement can also really develop that messiness that you speak about. It's in this way of trying to exchange, to weave the web, right? And to bring these different opinions together and see where is it that it all connects? Where is it that we meet in that messy middle?
Yeah, so as I would say, as opposed to the 5 minute, where there's speak and then reflecting, it feels like you're looking at the opportunity for adding a little bit more messiness in the way we interact. And yet, of course, having the empathy within that. Is that where you were going?
Yeah, no, so the messiness is in the undeveloped thought that I'm trying to share with you and that you're trying to capture with me, right? And it's there, that is messy, because I'm not sure where I'm going with what I'm saying at the moment. But it's there where I think, where I also speak to your business, in business, this is also what happens a lot in business processes, right? It is messy. And it's this listening that can help figure out what that mess is all about.
All right. So if there is a question and we're discussing it together, there is a messiness within it inherently, just like in business. And by having these empathy circles and having empathy, we can actually explore the messiness of our lives, or a question or a business challenge, and allow for that within the messiness for us to sort of come together on some path.
Thank you for helping me to explore that crazy mind of mine.
Love it. Well, Lidewij, I put you back on because that, just to keep it on different. So a movement, and to Lou's point earlier, I have been someone who's talked a lot about transparency as another interesting attribute, a little bit like authenticity. And I've been trying to figure out why transparency and authenticity are so sought after. And I feel like in the case of transparency, it is necessarily political. Because if I want to know everything about you or a company, it feels like there's a rooting around or opportunity for investigation that can go better my way for what I want to achieve if I make you more transparent.
Okay, so you're wondering about transparency and authenticity in relationship to the movement, and you say transparency has something inherently political related to, I want your transparency in order so that I can better see what my business goals or my objectives, how they play out, how I can achieve what I want to achieve.
Yeah, that exactly, Lidewij. And so calls for transparency are typically coming from someone else who doesn't necessarily have to stand up to the same idea. The notion is, I'm an organization and I want you to be transparent. That's sort of how it rolls as far as the transparency movement is concerned. And I'm just thinking about that, Lou, the idea of the small movement versus a big movement, because in the end of the day, a movement that's for everybody is, for me, a movement for nobody, in that it's too global and it's too nice to have. And especially coming back to my little wheels, which are focused on the business world, we typically have to spend resources and we need to measure against something. So if we're moving people, organizations from somewhere to somewhere, how do we measure progress in that movement?
So you say about transparency, the call for transparency is often outsourced. I'm the organization, I want you to be transparent. And you relate that to what Lou was saying about the movement and about big or small, and you think if it becomes too, it can't be too big, right? If it's for all, it's for nobody. So in the business world, you're looking at, I think you're saying goals, or you're looking at achievements. I'm not sure, I don't get your words there, but yeah, setting out, right? If the movement, measurements, the movement is around, so movement towards something that we can measure. That's what you were expressing.
And the reality is that resources are limited, and therefore we need to be strategic about using our time, our money, books you want to write. And if you're trying to do too much with the movement, it'll be very difficult to make it effective at some level, because we won't be able to measure, hey, we moved the stick from here to there.
Yeah, so important is, the reality of, resources are limited. And so you need to, again, when you move from here to there, you need to look at resources, what you're putting in, and how can you in the end measure that there is actually a movement that is happening.
That's the sort of thing I'm constantly confronted with in business, So if we want to do a movement, having an objective, I think, which is measurable or definable, that will, in my world, help me with my ability to onboard people into the empathy movement.
Yeah, so that's your world of, that's the, there needs to be objectives. And so it's probably good to, if we want to start a movement, to have an objective that is measurable, that is definable, that will help you to onboard others into the movement.
That's my world. Thank you, Lidewij. I feel very heard.
Yeah. Do I get to still talk again, eh? Lou, would you listen?
Yes, I'd like to.
And yet we shouldn't be preaching to the choir. Right? So I'm very much also with Minter on the onboarding into the movement. Right? We do a lot of preaching to the choir. I see it a lot in the interactions around my own work. There is a choir that is happy to listen, and that's fantastic, and I'm very grateful for the choir, and there is a lot to develop within the choir, and yet I'd like to have some new recruits.
So like Minter, you think it's really important to think about, what about the people that are not oriented towards empathy or aren't very empathic? Who's reaching out to them? Who's helping them to understand more or to gain skill? And and there's too much preaching to the choir. Although there's still a lot of work to do within the choir, and you're very happy to have the choir. You think it's really important to put attention on who is not inclined towards empathy right now.
It's interesting because I was not thinking of people who are not empathic, right? I'm more thinking of people who are not, because I have doubts around people not being empathic, but more thinking around people who are not listening to that world. We're in a world where everybody is constantly yapping, and so we have very few channels that we listen to. And how can we channel some of that empathy work? How can we reach channels that are usually not listening to that type of choir?
Yeah, so I think you're saying that first you question whether it's actually there are any people that are not empathic. So it wasn't so much that you were saying we need to reach out to people who are not empathic. It's more you're saying, how do we reach people who are not necessarily listening to us? Who are because there's so many channels and there's so much yapping that's going on in the world, that there are lots of people who are not listening to anyone who's talking about listening to people and the importance of listening and the importance of mutual understanding. And you're saying, how do we reach those people? Is that right?
I feel very heard. Thank you.
Okay.
Up to you.
Okay. So I'll go to Edwin.
Yep, listening.
Yeah, so I align also with this idea of, trying to reach people who are not, actually, I think of it as people who are not feeling good. So people who want to be in an empathy circle and who are angry and who have a lot of questions and a lot of skepticism and a lot of, tumult. It's really important to provide a place to listen, to provide listening to those folks.
Mm-hmm. So you're also interested in how to offer listening to people who are in tumult and having sort of issues here. So kind of reaching out beyond.
Yeah, and to actually help increase people's capacity to listen to pain. Listen to people who are angry. Listen to people who are deeply wounded. My experience is most people have a lot of difficulty listening to those people, and they think people who are angry, they think that they're a problem. Or people who are deeply sad, they want to rescue them, take care of them somehow.
Yeah, so you'd like to show people or how to listen to people who are in pain, because usually they try to avoid that, and you'd like to support them and being able to listen to those people.
Yeah, and the path to that is listening to people, doing the work of helping people feel understood and helping them move through their own pain. I mean, the people who can sit most with pain are the people who have kind of been through some and feel understood for it, or healed some themselves from pain. That's my experience. You know, they have a greater capacity to sit with people who are angry, or to sit with people who are grieving.
So the approach you want to take is to listen to people, and you just know, just from your experience, you've seen that people who have had pain, dealt with their pain, that they're better at sitting with other people's pain. They've sort of developed sort of more of a capacity for that.
Yeah, and this is actually something I've been thinking about a lot, probably for the last 2 years. And I actually haven't figured out, I haven't really taken much action on it, other than listening to people, you know, who I think need some listening. But the idea that, and this is a lot in the social change area also, because I notice people in the social change area who are motivated, whose energy comes out of, they're carrying a lot of pain, and they want to see change, and that's what motivates them. And the problem is that they are coming out of their pain, so they actually aren't, they're mostly trying to create change by stopping people and powering over those people, you know, threatening them, getting people to stop doing whatever they don't like, rather than creating a connection and listening and understanding and creating relationship.
So you're seeing that people who are doing social action are often coming out of a sense of pain. From that pain standpoint of pain, they're sort of powering over people, being critical, or trying to dominate. And so you'd like to, you've just been thinking for the last while, like, how do you really listen to those people and maybe empathize?
Well, and how to create, it's really how to create, what kinds of thing needs to be created so that they can work through their stuff. I don't know. I haven't figured out how to create a context for that to happen.
So you'd like to create some kind of a context for people who are coming from that point of view or from that situation, that it would be a context that they could be supported in some way, and you just haven't quite figured out yet, like, how can you really do that?
Yeah. And that really, for me, that's a segment of those people that Minter and Lidewij are talking about, who are, because they actually often, like when I talk about empathy, come to empathy circles, like they don't have time for that. You know, I already know what's going on over there. I don't need to listen to those people. We need to take action against those people. You know, that's their point of view, and they're very action oriented. So to sit around and talk and listen, or to try to understand, why would I even try to understand someone who's doing terrible stuff that I don't want? We need to shut them down, you know, not understand them.
So like Minter is talking about people in the business area, how to reach out to them and connect with them. You're seeing another community, which is the social activist community. And you're kind of looking like, how do you really connect? How can I really connect with them? And I think that's your time to.
Okay.
Do you feel heard enough on
Thanks.
that?
Yeah, I feel very. I have more I want to say
There's more to say
about the business community. Yes, but yes, I feel very heard. Thank you for hearing me.
Okay, I'll speak to Lidewij. Did make some notes here, because there's so many topics coming up here. We're going a lot of different directions, but I do think that a starting point for an empathy movement is doing what we're doing. It is empathic dialogue. So the means that we're doing of listening to each other is sort of the end. So the means are the end. So what we're doing is building an empathy movement by being here in an empathy circle.
Yeah, so you took some notes because you also recognize that we're all over the place with all these topics and things, but you also realize that anyway, we're doing it, we're building the movement because we're getting together, and it's the means is the end. So we're working on it.
Yeah, so what I'd like to do is set the topic, the intention of building a movement, which you were talking about. Hey, what's the intention? The intention, it really needs to be articulated. Well, what is the movement? You know, what is it? What is it that we're going to? And all that can be articulated. But to keep bringing empathy activists into these circles and just have dialogues, you know, like this, and they're recorded and they'll be transcribed and be posted and other people can check, and hopefully we can sort of harvest ideas, but that it's sort of an ongoing dialogue with, you know, starting with the choir, which is the empathy activists.
Yeah, yeah, and so you're recognizing, yeah, okay, intention and goal setting and measuring and where we're going and all that it needs to be there, needs to be articulated. But what you would like to do is to have that come from the choir itself, to just keep on having these dialogues with people, and to find a way to document and share what's happening there and let it build.
Yeah, and I know one thing that kind of got me too is when I heard the measurements. I hear measurements all the time, and I love measurements. I mean, but I also have a little bit of skepticism of measurements, because I never see measurements that say measuring is valid, is effective. So there's sort of and maybe it's out there, but it's almost like it's a premise, and it doesn't seem to be really questioned. So I kind of would like to question the premise of measurement is even beneficial.
Yeah, wondering if measurement is even beneficial, and you realize that, measurement, it's out there, we all need it, but you wonder really about, very often what we're measuring is then not showing up, right? So what's really, should we really be measuring?
Yeah, is it like the cult of measurement or something? Is it a cult, you know? So, yeah,
to the point of becoming a cult.
And like reason seems to be almost a cult. Like, hey, there's this thing, reason, and you know, it's not feelings, and it seems to be almost like it's an unquestioned thing of its own, you know. So
yeah, and the other cult of reason, the endless reason, when they're not feeling, not just reason. Let's be reasonable.
Right, exactly. You captured the essence. So those are some thoughts. And I want to say I like reasoning, you know, thinking things through. I like, you know, measuring too, but I do want to have sort of a space to say, you know, maybe there's, you know, let's question that as well. So
yeah, so opening the door a bit, saying I do like reasoning and measuring. It's just that, can we also question it, please?
Yeah, it's like this is, we got to have reason, we got to have you know, measurements. It's not real unless it's reason, or you know, it's like that. It's almost like a little dogmatic. So
yeah.
You guys go for it.
Dogmatic.
Oh, I was gonna get some drama here.
Well, you've had this is the second time dogs have come up. We have a dog-eat-dog world of dogmatism.
Let's keep that in the chat.
Yeah. So the other was the lungs. Yeah, there's something more too about the metaphor of the lungs, and it's about good and bad, or good and evil. That does seem to be a judgment. It's like you don't necessarily say lungs are good or evil or bad. It's just like, hey, it really it really helps your well-being, right? If you have lungs, you're going to be alive, and it's inherently inherently not necessarily good. It's inherently, you know, positive for your well-being. So I think there's more around that metaphor too to kind of explore.
So believing that there's something more to explore around the lungs, which are inherently positive for your well-being, not good or bad, but still inherently positive, and not sure where you're getting at yet.
Yeah, and I feel fully heard, and that was my time.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Winter. So yes. I do think I very much believe in Edwin's approach of we need to get together and keep having these conversations, and that's very useful. And that's why I've been with Edwin for 10 years already, and you know, we've done this a lot over time. And yet we need to measure, we need to be reasonable, we need to find ways to have this space for people, especially in the social change movements that have this pain that they need to work through. I still think there needs to be some sort of intention. And I don't think that just getting together with different people and having these conversations, I think it's great. It's not intentional, and maybe it doesn't have to be intentional, but I believe that intention can help us if we really want to build a movement. I think there needs to be an intention.
So the choir being preached to is good. Hanging out with people like us and doing everything in circles is useful. And yet there does probably need to be some form of measurement. And if you are looking at the pain that exists within the people in the social justice movement, dealing with them, there needs to be some form of intention. There may need to be some form of intentionality in order for the movement to actually happen. I was feeling you were questioning at some point at the end whether or not intention actually is necessary.
Oh yeah, so no, I'm quite convinced. Sometimes I'm very convinced. I think intention is necessary. Intention can change, but I think intention for the movement can help to narrow things down and also to do that measurement in the end, right? And so I really think, except from empathy being neutral, I also think empathy is a means to an end. And so with this measurement, what's very often going wrong is that we start to measure empathy. And I think that's a no-go. It's no point in measuring empathy in an empathy movement. I think we need to look at what do we set out to do? And if we have that intentionality, then we can also have an idea about, so what is it then that we need to measure? What change does it bring about?
Yeah, no, so you're very much on the idea of having intention. While intention itself may be able to change, you do need the intention in order to focus the spirit, if you will, towards something. So it is empathy, a means to that goal, if the intention could be made specific.
Yeah, thank you. I feel familiar.
Lou. I think I've been in a number of associations of like-minded people, and my observation is that these have not succeeded in the past, and I think tough decisions were avoided in each of the cases where these like-minded, nice people with great skills, by the way, we wouldn't coalesce or punch through into a stronger team. And I see that happening in certain political movements as well. It's almost like a movement against these nasty people. We're not them, but what are we? And that political movement flops for a lack of taking the tough decisions that needed to happen, if you will, before the marriage.
Yeah, so you're saying you've been involved in a number of groups or associations, you called them, with people who were, capable and smart and like-minded and nice people. And what you experienced more than once was a group like that having difficulty actually coalescing into an effective force to like make decisions and do something significant. And they were clear in their opposition to something else, but not so clear maybe about what they wanted to be or do that was constructive. And you think that was that was part of the reason, or the main reason, for their failure.
Yeah. And so maybe it's flying the ointment, but I do feel like in all the goodness that is within empathy and empathy circles, and of course I subscribe. I'm wondering what fly in the ointment is needed in order for the movement to grip. You know, it's almost like we're making a batter, but do we need some vanilla in it, or do we need some pepper in it to just have that little bit of catch that allows it to, as we say in French, Paul, that the cake grows. You know, I don't know that the batter, the dough rises, and somehow taking a strategic position which allows us to reinforce our resources will give us a stronger point to what we're doing. And so moving away from nice to a little bit of a razor's edge to where we're trying to go, we can cut through the noise. We can break through stronger if we have more strong, maybe harder conversations at the beginning.
Yeah, so you're wondering, what I'm getting is, you're wondering if the empathy circle of movement, like us, this group here, and maybe the larger empathy movement group, might be suffering from the same thing that you're saying was going on in those other groups. And while you subscribe to empathy circle and think that process is good and empathy is great, you're wondering if there isn't something else that's needed, some ingredient, something harder maybe, that would sharpen the focus or sharpen the intention of what we're trying to do, that would help the movement break through or rise, as you put it, like the dough rising. And so you're reflecting on that. You didn't actually say what that might be, but you're wondering about that.
Nope, I certainly don't. But I think it's somehow, I have a feeling it's in the space of intention. But we're going to need to make a decision at some level what that intention is, with words on a page that are just not, oh, I kind of get it. I feel like it needs to be a tighter version, which might be a little bit painful, but I feel like that would help us coalesce better.
Yeah, so you're thinking that ingredient that might sharpen what we're doing is a statement of intention, and you're thinking that it might be painful to actually try to come up with one that's very clear and focused, but you think that maybe is an important thing to do.
The last thing I have to say is I keep on thinking you have a Pokemon behind you. As it sort of pierces through the blur. I feel very heard, Lou. Thank you.
So you feel very heard by me, and you're very curious about my background and what's back there. Okay, and so I will defocus it for a moment so you can see. So it's a couple of art pieces.
Oh,
One is a John Lennon painting.
John Lennon.
Yeah, and the other one is some kind of box sculpture that's got stuff in the middle of it. Right, yeah, my mother and father-in-law are artists, and they ran an art school. So actually, the painting behind me is my father-in-law's art, and the other one is someone else's piece of art.
Fabulous.
Okay, I'll go to Edwin.
Yep, listening.
Yeah, so when I think about, what would the intention of an empathy movement be, and what would we measure, and maybe this is too fuzzy for Minter, but I think of it as increasing people's capacity increasing people's desire to listen to each other with openness and curiosity, and their capacity to do that. And what we would measure is whether people feel like their capacity to do that has risen or not. I mean, this is in the public listening project I did. This was one of the things we asked the people who participated. I did do a survey, and that was one of the things I asked them was, do you feel like your interest in listening to others who are different than you is greater? Do you feel like your capacity to do that is greater? I'll stop there.
So looking at what the intention would be, you're saying that it's to raise people's real interest or to listen, and then also to improve their skills, their listening skills. So it's really about, if they're wanting to listen, their motivation to listen as well as their skills.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you say, and their listening skills, I think, well, no, empathy, because empathy is more just listening. It's open-heartedness, it's actually being open-heartedness and like being able to feel some of what the other person is feeling. So it is, I mean, that we could say that that's part of listening skills, but I want to make sure that would be part of it, is actually increasing the willingness and openness to open your heart to other people.
So part of that is an openness to opening your heart to others. So going deeper, maybe empathizing, which would be kind of a deeper listening.
And I think when I reflect on it, I think actually having that as an intention, like what I just described, that trusts that if that was happening more and people were doing that more, that good things would come from that. I don't know what they would be. It would be like a million different things would come from that. But it would be trusting that good things would come from that, as opposed to making a statement that our intention is to create a more empathic world because we want this outcome. I don't know what the outcome would be, but I do trust that if people were more open-hearted to each other and they did listen to people who to each other with more curiosity and openness, the world would be a better place. I mean, good things would come from that, I think.
Yeah, so you're really trusting that if people listen to each other, that just better things will happen. Instead of having some sort of a fixed goal, just creating a space where people listen to each other. Sounds like actually a deep trust that would create the context for a better world.
Yeah. And I want to go on record saying I do think measuring is important. I think there is a lot of evidence that if you don't measure things, then you don't know where you are and you don't know if you're making progress or not. And I would say in my own life experience, if I am trying to make a change, like I want to be more fit or I want to lose some weight, having a way of measuring what I'm doing, that has had a huge influence on my success at doing those things.
So
I believe in measuring a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And although I will admit some things are very hard to measure.
Yeah, some things are hard to measure, but you've used measurement for weight, losing weight, and so you're a real supporter of measuring.
Yeah. What else do I want to say? I want to say something about what Minter was saying about authenticity and transparency. So I think that the reason that people think that those things are important is because there's either a conscious or an unconscious recognition that if people aren't honest with each other, like if we don't really talk about what's going on, whatever problems we're trying to solve or product we're trying to produce or organization we're trying, if we're not like real with each other, we're not going to get anywhere. People are going to be playing games with each other, and so I think that's why those things are valued. And I think that those things will happen if you create safety for people to be honest and transparent with each other. The reason people aren't is because, it's not safe to do that. People use the information that they get against you, and to attack you or criticize you or get rid of you or whatever.
Okay, I'll reflect that. But I know Minter had to leave 20 minutes, so I just want to give a notice there. So until next time,
you're going?
Minter. Yeah, he had
so wonderful to be with you. Great to see you.
Bye, Minter.
Cheerio. Lovely. Likewise. See you, Edwin.
Okay. Right. So so let me reflect that. So that you're wanting to build on the value of openness and transparency, that you feel that people inherently know that openness and transparency is positive and will lead to positive outcomes. Was that sort of the essence?
Well,
Safety.
yes, they know it's essential. You have a sense just that it's essential for being real and having real conversations and like making some kind of real progress in any kind of relationship. But the reason people aren't authentic and transparent is because it's not safe to do so. That if you don't know how people are going to use the information that you're giving them, if there's a chance that they're going to use it against you, then you're going to hide it, you know.
So
you have to create safety.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to create safety. If you want openness and transparency, you have to create safety for that.
Yeah, so people inherently know there's a positive aspect to openness and transparency, but then they are also afraid that it might be used against them. So you have to create a sense of safety. So creating that safety is really important.
And one of the problems in business is that if it's a competitive environment where people are trying to beat each other and people are trying to, you know, take advantage of each other, then openness and transparency are dangerous. You know?
And there's environments like business where if you're open and transparent, people can really use that against you. So there's a reason for not being open and transparent. And that was the time too.
Yeah, sorry, right. You said my time was up. Sorry about that.
Yeah, speak to Lidewij then. Again, so let's see. Okay, so I'm with Lou on the importance of the listening, and I see empathy as sort of a deeper form of listening. And as the starting point, I think that it leads to sort of a positive cycle. So that listening and that being sort of an intention, let's, you know, foster more listening, you know, among society as sort of the intention, sort of a foundational intention.
So for you, the foundational intention of listening in and amongst society is, you're with Lou on that could be the intention, right, of what we're setting out to do, recognizing that empathy is some sort of deeper form of listening.
Yeah, and it leads to a whole, if you just have a faith and a trust in that listening, and that if we can create an environment of listening and empathy, that you don't know what all the outcomes are going to be, because there'll be sort of an emergence that happens, but that there's sort of a something biologically that we're wired for, that it leads to a whole series of positive outcomes and that lead to greater well-being.
Yeah, and so having faith in that capacity of listening and that practice of listening, that leads to a whole series of outcomes related to well-being, greater well-being.
Yeah, so I know that if I know that I'm going to be heard in an environment, somebody's going to always be there to listen to me, I feel more trusting. In fact, it seems like you know, I don't have to start with trust. I can be with people who are totally battling and in conflict with me. But if I know that they're willing to listen, then my trust goes up. And then with my trust going up, I feel more open, you know, to be more transparent. So I see that the listening is sort of the starting, you know, the starting point for that positive cycle.
Yeah, and so you have that experience of if somebody is willing to listen to you, then automatically your trust goes up, you feel safer. And even if the conversation can be very conflictual and difficult, that willingness to listen is like the basis to work from.
Yeah, so the trust is going up, my openness and transparency is going up, you know, I feel better, it just feels less stressed. I feel more creative, you know, ideas kind of pop up, kind of deeper, and it's just, there's a whole positive cycle that starts, and people say, oh, you have to do this, you have to be open, you have to, but I think it really starts with that trust in the listening and the empathy. And in that case, it's you can go into any situation with that.
Yeah, so starting with really the trust in that people want to listen to you opens you up, your transparency goes up, you get more creative, you have more ideas, you feel better. So really the center of that listening and the trust and what escalates from there in positive outcomes.
Yeah,
Measurements.
and so I'm a bit like creating the movement is let's create a culture where that becomes like the social norm. And I think that it's totally doable, you know, with it's something that can be done by, you know, getting high profile people to be doing empathy circles and listening by a grassroots. So it just coming out from a lot of different directions. I think, you know, having a cultural shift, the overall culture will be, you know, have more well-being just by promoting those values. And we don't know where it's going to go, because I have no idea what's going to come up, but it's a trust in sort of the process in that as that first step.
Yeah, so while you don't know where it's going to go and what it's going to bring up, the trust in that process of the listening, of that willingness to get these values, right? And you think this is building that culture is very possible by reaching out to high profile people, grassroots movements, right? You think it's very doable also in the world.
Yeah, and I can understand, you know, the social activists who are saying we got to get out there and we got to battle and we got to fight, because, you know, the status quo is often like, hey, we've got the power, we've got the status quo, we don't need to listen to you. So people are saying, hey, I want to be heard here, and I got to, like, you know, really create trouble and pain for you and everybody else, because you won't listen otherwise. So there's all these subtle forms of not listening, of just not being willing to engage in a dialogue, and it's sort of rampant within the society. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you very much understand the social movements and their battle, you know, forceful ways of trying to get attention, because the powers that be are not listening, are not willing to listen. And so they have to battle their way through in order to be heard. And that goes rampant in society.
And I really get what Minter is saying. It's like saying, oh, please, you know, society, will you be more listening? You know, if we, people say, yeah, pat you on the head and say, yes, nice, you know, nice idea, but it won't change. There's something else needed to, you know, shift the society. And the social activists are saying, well, if we just create enough pain for everybody and, you know, this, then it'll change. But I don't think so, because they're just creating, the means have to be the end somehow.
Yeah. So you get what Minter is saying about, you know, it's not enough this, will you listen? Yeah, we'll listen. They actually don't, right? And so you get why there is this movement of aggression and activism and creating as much pain as possible in the world in order to get that change happening. But you also think that's not the way. The means is the end. It starts with that willingness to listen.
Yeah, I feel very heard. So maybe if you take the next turn, we'll end after that. I think we're coming to the.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Lou. It was a pleasure. It was very nice, this conversation. I am also with Minter. I think we need to have another call and explore more around this painful, peppery, you know, I do think that empathy is more than a willingness to listen and an opening of your heart. There's much more to empathy. And one of the things around safety that we work with in empathic intervision is conducive environment, right? But also what I work with a lot is imaginative empathy, which really helps to shift perspectives, which is not coming from just listening. So there's ways. I believe in the power of the just listening. And I also think that there's more to empathy that we can work with to establish what we're trying to set out to do in the world.
Yeah, so you're saying you would like to continue this conversation, like Minter said in his comment, and you're saying that you've really enjoyed this conversation a lot, and you're saying that there is more to empathy than listening, than good listening, and you mentioned imaginative empathy as a way to help people shift perspective, and you indicated there are other aspects of empathy, and you would really like to think together about that, about how to bring those into what we're doing and how to yeah.
I'm not sure if it, I also think that Edwin is right with his gateway, simple practice of listening. It's not that easy at all, right? So why not start with that? And I think I also very much support that, but I believe that Minter is right with his, we might need something painful in order to stop preaching to the choir, in order to onboard these people that we're not reaching at the moment. And we might have to explore that a bit more together in a more of a, apparently, according to Minter, I'm not sure why, a painful way.
Yeah, so you're agreeing with Edwin that the empathy circle and basic listening, is a really good entry point, simple and a good place to start. But you also agree with Minter that you think maybe something more is needed and maybe something painful is needed in order to break through to a larger segment of society. Yeah. Right, and not just what we're doing now and being nice. Yeah.
Well, yeah, so I'm not sure why I would like to explore with him why he talks about pain, right? It's an interesting approach. What is it that needs to be painful in order for it to change? I'm not sure where he's getting at, but it intrigues me very much. Yeah,
and so on the painful part, you're intrigued by that, the idea that we might have to do something painful in order to have more impact. But you really just want to explore that. You're not sure that you agree with that, but you're intrigued by it and you want to explore it more.
Yeah. And I have many more things that happened today that I think we could explore further. So what I'd like to do, and what I often do, is after we have these circles, I watch the video on a nice quiet evening and just, re-ponder all that we've been discussing, and maybe get together another time and pick up on some of the things that we discussed today. So try and not enlarge it even bigger, but try and come back to a few of the things. I mean, I'm happy to enlarge as well, but starting off with a few of the things that are open in this conversation.
Yeah, so you were very stimulated by the conversation today, and there were lots of ideas that you would like to discuss more fully or explore. And something that you like to do after a meeting like this is to watch the recording and reflect on what was said and maybe make notes about things that you think are important, and to have another conversation and explore those things more deeply.
Because that's the other thing about listening that is always so interesting, is that you think you're a good listener and you do good reflective listening, and then I watch the video and I think, I was bad again.
Yeah, so another thing that happens to you, one of the reasons you do that practice is because it really helps you think about how good a listener are you, and what things did you hear or what things did you miss. Yeah. And it really you learn a lot from doing that.
Yeah, and it makes me realize how much we listen to react rather than listening to reflect or to understand or to open the heart or to empathize.
Yeah, it really brings home for you how much, even though we try not to do it, how much we listen to evaluate what the person is saying and think about what we might, whether we agree or disagree, or how we might respond to it, rather than just opening our hearts to what they're saying and really take in what they're saying.
Thank you. But I'd like to end on that.
Okay, well, great.
Thanks.
So maybe we can just do a little wrap up from each of us. I'd love to have the same group come together again. I'll be posting this video. I'll run it through the transcription, so we'll also have a transcription. I'll put it up on upload it to YouTube and make it available. And it'd be great to follow up. We're from this point. I thought it was a great idea, and we can schedule that with Minter. Also, like to invite you to reach out to others so we can, kind of expand this circle. So, perhaps Lidewij, if you know 2 other people, we could, bring them into a circle and kind of just keep expanding the topic. So it's sort of this ongoing topic, and Lou as well. If you know two people that you like, especially maybe in the NVC community, we could bring some in, like Mickey or John Kenyon or others like that. So that's what I'm up for, to kind of keep this this kind of dialogue on this topic going. I find it very fruitful. Really enjoyed it. Great to connect with all of you. So I don't know, Lou, do you want to sort of check in?
Yeah, I loved the conversation today. You know, I had met Minter before. Lidewij, I don't know, have I been in a circle with you before?
I don't think so.
Okay, I really enjoyed you. Thought you were lovely and loved your thinking, and it was really stimulating. And I feel exactly like you. Like, so we talked a little bit about a lot of things, and I would love to continue the conversation. So I'd love to do at least one more session. And actually, it made me think while we were doing this. I was thinking, you know, we're doing this for 2 hours, which seems like, you know, a big block of time. But the truth is, when groups of people get together to really think about things, they do a weekend. You know, it's like a retreat. They do a retreat, like a Friday evening, Saturday, Sunday, leaving Sunday at, you know, so we're talking about lots of hours together to sit and think together and talk and reflect. So, you know, a couple hours really isn't that much time to really think deeply about something with a group of people. So yeah, I'd be very happy to have another conversation, and I will consider forming another circle with a couple of other people, but I'm not committing to doing that. I will think, I'll think about doing that. I really want to think about who I might want to do that with. But I appreciate the invitation, though. It does make me think about who else might I really want to engage in a conversation about this kind of thing. And it's making me think about that, developing local allies that I might want to work with. It might be actually a good context for doing that.
Interesting. Yeah.
Any wrap up, Lidewij?
Well, no, I already wrapped up.
Okay, that was sort of your wrap up. You'd already kind of done it. And well, I would add maybe, I think that the 2 hours is a sort of a fixed time that we've done. And I have been thinking, hey, how about a marathon, like an 8-hour empathy circle marathon on this topic? So it's something to think about, because there is something about after the third or fourth hour, it's like I find there's a deeper shift that happens, and it's something. So that would be maybe another thing to try. So
I think we need to get one of those very easily reachable sponsors to get us together in a tent or around the fire to do a marathon. I'll be up for a marathon, but not online.
Not online.
Well, I was going to say I've never done one online. It'd be interesting to do that. Obviously, we need breaks. We're not going to do this for 8 hours straight. But what's interesting is in a retreat, you would have sessions, and then you have breaks, and then things that happens during the breaks is people have side conversations, and really there are interesting things that happen when you're together that wouldn't necessarily happen online. And so I obviously it would be a different sort of thing.
Then again, we shouldn't exclude. Maybe we should give it a try. I'll consider it too. Edwin.
Yay, great. We have an opening. I've done 4.5 hours, and into about the third or fourth hour, there's a sort of an interesting feeling shift that happens. So that could be good. So we're open for that too. So great. Okay, well, thanks everyone. To be continued, and it was a pleasure, and see you next time.
Thanks for inviting me into this, Edwin. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And great meeting you, Lidewij.
Yeah, very nice. See you soon.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye.